All right, so welcome to the Case Reports podcast. Today we are going to be taking a deep dive into a really fascinating case report that I think is going to get you thinking.
Yeah.
It's called "Unexpectedly Long Survival of Patient with Chronic Lymphocytic Leukemia: Why Integrative Methods Matter," and it was published in Integrative Medicine, a clinician's journal back in February of 2018.
Hmm.
Now, of course, before we go any further, I have to give the old disclaimer. This deep dive is just for information, educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Right.
So please talk to your doctor before making any healthcare decisions, starting any new treatment or anything like that.
Always a good idea.
Yeah. Now, this particular case report, it really kind of stood out to me because it looks at this patient with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Yeah, CLL, exactly. And this patient had a really long period of stability, like way longer than you might typically expect. So to really understand what makes this case so remarkable, we should probably take a step back and just make sure everyone's on the same page about what CLL actually is. So could you break down CLL for us, like in layman's terms?
Sure. Yeah. So CLL, at its core, it's a type of cancer, and it affects your blood and your bone marrow.
Mm.
And it's known as a slow-growing leukemia, so it tends to progress more gradually than some other types of blood cancers.
Okay.
Now, what happens is your body starts making too many abnormal white blood cells, and those are called lymphocytes. And these abnormal cells, they don't function properly, and they actually start crowding out all the healthy blood cells, the ones that carry oxygen and help with clotting and, all the good stuff, fighting infections.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, imagine if your bloodstream is like a highway, and suddenly you have all these like broken down cars clogging up the lanes. That's kind of what's happening in your blood with CLL.
That's a great analogy. So if you have this buildup of abnormal cells, what kind of stats are we looking at with CLL? Like, how common is it?
Well, actually, CLL is one of the more common leukemias in adults.
Sure.
Some estimates say it accounts for about a quarter of all new cases of leukemia.
Wow.
Yeah. The average age of diagnosis is around 70. And it's a little more common in men than in women. Now, while a lot of people with CLL live for many years, it does eventually progress and require treatment in most cases.
Okay, so it's relatively common, but it is slow growing, but typically needs treatment.
Hmm.
Now, the report that we're looking at today mentions that in the early stages, CLL is often manageable. So for someone who's newly diagnosed, what does that actually mean for them?
Well, in the beginning, a lot of folks with CLL, they don't have any symptoms, so they don't even realize they have it.
Right.
And that's often why it's picked up during routine blood work, just kind of by chance. And because it progresses so slowly, doctors often take a watch and wait approach, which basically means they monitor your blood counts. And they're looking for signs the disease is becoming more active and might need some intervention.
So watch and wait. I mean, it sounds kind of passive, but I guess if it's slow moving, it makes sense to kind of wait and see.
Right.
Now, when it does progress and requires treatment, what are the typical medical options for CLL?
So when treatment does become necessary, there are a few well-established approaches. One is chemotherapy, which uses drugs to kill the cancer cells.
Right.
Another one is targeted therapy, which really focuses on like vulnerabilities within those cancer cells. And then we have immunotherapy, which basically harnesses your body's own immune system to fight off the cancer. And the treatment plan will depend on a lot of things, the stage of your CLL, overall health, and even specific genetic markers that are found in your leukemia cells. So, these treatments have really improved outcomes for patients with CLL.
Okay, so those are the conventional tools that doctors have in their toolbox. But the case we're focusing on today, this is really unique, right? Because we're talking about someone who lived with CLL for over 15 years without needing any of those standard treatments.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. This case report looks at a patient who was diagnosed back in 2001 at the age of 56. And she lived for more than 15 years without any chemotherapy, targeted drugs, or immunotherapy.
Wow.
So considering the typical course of CLL, it's really an unexpected outcome. And it really makes us think what factors might have contributed to her long period of stability. And could there be more to managing these chronic conditions than we typically think about?
15 years is a really long time to live with a condition like leukemia. I mean, the title of this report highlights how unusual this is. So what made this particular case worthy of being published in a medical journal?
What's really interesting here is that this patient took a very proactive approach to managing her health. She worked with an integrative physician, and she combined dietary changes with a whole range of different supplements.
Hmm.
And it's not like she rejected conventional medicine or anything. She still had regular checkups with her medical team, but she was actively supporting her overall health in ways that might have influenced the progression of her CLL.
So let's talk about this integrative approach. The report lists a lot of supplements that she was taking. Can you kind of walk us through some of the key ones and explain why she might have chosen them?
Sure. One of the main supplements was EGCG,
Okay.
which is an extract from green tea,
Oh, okay.
and some lab studies. And it's important to remember these are usually done in test tubes or animal models, not always in humans.
Right.
But some studies have suggested that EGCG might be able to, like, trigger cancer cell death. And then she also took curcumin, which is the active compound in turmeric. And you probably know turmeric. It's well known for its anti-inflammatory properties. Inflammation is being linked to more and more diseases these days, even some cancers. So including curcumin might have helped address that aspect.
So EGCG may be fighting cancer cells directly and curcumin tackling inflammation. What else was she taking?
She also took vitamin D3, which is super important for your immune system. There were also omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which are good for your heart and have anti-inflammatory effects as well. And then NAC, or N-acetylcysteine, which is an antioxidant that helps your body's natural detox processes. Oh, and milk thistle and broccoli extract. Those are often used to support liver health and detoxification too.
It really sounds like a holistic approach, targeting different systems in the body. And there were a couple more on the list too, right? Methylation support and DHEA.
You got it. Methylation support often uses B vitamins, and it's all about healthy cell function. Methylation is a really basic process that happens in every cell in your body, and it affects things like DNA repair and cell growth. And a lot of people think supporting healthy methylation is good for your cells overall. And DHEA, that's a hormone that decreases naturally as we age. It may help boost the immune system, but we don't really know for sure how it works with CLL.
Okay. So alongside all these supplements, the report also talks about lifestyle modifications. What did those look like for her?
Basically, she focused on eating whole, unprocessed organic foods. The idea is to get a variety of nutrients and avoid processed stuff and anything potentially toxic. The report doesn't give a ton of details, but it does say she probably got regular exercise as well, which makes sense for anyone, but can also help boost your immune system.
So we've got targeted supplements and a clean, healthy lifestyle. And over those 15 years, the results were pretty impressive. Can you remind us what indicators showed how stable her condition was?
For sure. Over those 15 years, her white blood cell count did increase, which you'd expect with CLL, but it went up very slowly. That suggests it wasn't progressing aggressively. And she only had one instance of an enlarged spleen, which can happen with CLL, but that was way back in 2005. Her platelet count, which had dropped initially, actually stabilized over time. And most importantly, she didn't have any symptoms. No fatigue, no infections, no night sweats. And remember, she never needed conventional cancer treatment during that whole time. She basically lived with this chronic condition in a really stable state. Pretty remarkable, huh?
It really is. It makes you wonder if these integrative methods played a role. The report even asks if natural compounds and lifestyle changes could help manage or slow down certain cancers. Based on this one case and what we know scientifically, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's definitely an interesting case. And it shows how powerful it can be to be proactive about your health. You know, this patient didn't just passively wait for her doctor to tell her what to do. She actively searched out ways to support her health. It also suggests that integrative medicine, when used responsibly and alongside conventional care, might be a good way to support long-term well-being with some chronic conditions. But, and this is really important, we can't say for sure that those supplements and lifestyle changes are what kept her stable for so long.
Right, that's a really important point. It's tempting to see this and think, oh, this is the answer. But we can't generalize from just one person's experience. It's possible she just happened to have a very slow-growing form of CLL.
Exactly. CLL is a very diverse disease, so it can behave very differently in different people. And some people do have what we call an indolent form, which means it progresses very slowly. But still, it's amazing that she stayed stable for so long, especially considering the integrative approach she was taking. It makes you think about how our biology, the disease itself, and how we manage our health all interact.
So for our listeners, what are the main takeaways from this case?
I'd say there are two big ones. First, it really highlights how important it can be to take an active role in managing chronic health issues. Don't just rely on your doctor, do your own research, look for ways to support your health. And second, it suggests that integrative medicine, when used thoughtfully alongside conventional care, could be really beneficial. But and I can't emphasize this enough, we need a lot more research. We need solid clinical trials to see if supplements like EGCG and curcumin and these lifestyle changes actually have an impact on how cancers progress. Right now, a lot of what we know is based on lab studies or individual cases like this one.
More research is definitely key to understanding what happened with this patient. This case may not give us all the answers, but it definitely brings up a lot of fascinating questions. It makes you think about all the possibilities when you combine different approaches to health.
Absolutely. It raises questions about how conventional and integrative approaches might work together to manage chronic illnesses. What kind of research do we need to do to explore these possibilities and see what works best for each person? Those are the questions we should be asking.
I completely agree. This is a great example of how one person's experience can challenge what we think we know and even point us in new directions for medical research. Thanks so much for breaking down this thought-provoking case for us.
It was my pleasure. It's amazing how individual stories like this can raise important questions and help shape the future of medicine.
And one last time for everyone listening, just a reminder that this deep dive is for informational purposes only. It's not medical advice, so always talk to a healthcare professional before starting a new supplement or treatment. If you're curious about the full case report, you can find it on the NIH database. The title is Case Report of Unexpectedly Long Survival of Patient with Chronic Lymphocytic Leukemia, Why Integrative Methods Matter. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.